Hi everyone, I'm Jenna.
And my name's Steve.
And welcome to another Field Trip Fridays. Where are we today, Steve?
We're at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and this is the Keenan Laboratories building. We're going to be visiting the Warren Lab, where we'll meet Madeline Stark and Lauren McRae. They're graduate students, they're chemists that work on making better batteries.
Cool, let's go check it out.
Let's do it.
Hey Lauren, hey Madeline.
Hey y'all.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
Cool, so can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do here at your lab?
So I'm Lauren McRae. I'm a third-year PhD candidate in the Department of Chemistry at UNC Chapel Hill. And I work to computationally and experimentally explore new materials that have applications in batteries.
Cool.
Cool. So that means you do experiments both like kind of on a bench, like in a laboratory, but then you also do kind of analysis and experimentation with computers?
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
I'm Madeline. I'm a fifth year in the Warren Lab, and I'm looking at taking materials for battery applications and characterizing them using different techniques to make sure that they're working and to see how we can maybe improve those materials.
That's really cool. What is an arc welder?
So basically it runs an electric arc through the chamber here, and when the copper hearth is up there, it acts as either the cathode or like as one electrode, and this acts as another electrode. And when you strike an arc, basically you touch the tungsten tip to the electrode, the copper hearth, and it creates an electric current that's really concentrated, so it'll get up to 2,000 to 3,000 degrees Celsius in the chamber, and it can melt really high melting point materials.
Cool.
And so, yeah, so typically when we do it, we'll put up the copper hearth into here, and it kind of just sits up in there. And we will flush out the chamber because it has oxygen in it. We'll flush it out with argon and vacuum. And then once we're positive that this is an argon atmosphere, we'll keep it at positive pressure. We tend to keep it around, I think, 15 to 20 kilopascals of argon atmosphere. And then we will turn on the electricity, we'll strike our arc, we'll try and melt our sample, and then we'll let it cool down because it gets really hot. So then we take it back out and we'll take it into the glove box, and we hope that we made what we were hoping to make. Yeah, so now that I'm in the glove box, I can manipulate everything in here, and this is the ball mill.
So this ball mill shakes.
It shakes. So we use it, I don't know that I have a ball mill jar in here now, but I can, oh yeah, we do. So we have a jar. This one's covered by Kapton tape because we close it with tape. But this is the size of the jar, and it has a top on it, and it's a stainless steel jar that has a little mini ball in it. And so you put the stainless steel ball in this little stainless steel jar with your material, and when it shakes, it breaks up the material into smaller pieces. And so we basically use it because sometimes hand grinding, if our materials are really hard, sometimes hand grinding doesn't work. And so this will allow us to grind it into smaller pieces than we might be able to by hand.
Why do you need your materials in small pieces?
So typically in solid state reactions, you're reacting multiple solid materials together in order to get them, or you're putting them together and trying to get them to react in the solid state, right? And so surface area is really important when trying to get them to react, because if there's more surface area that's interacting with one another, there's more likelihood of a reaction occurring. And so if you're able to get them into smaller pieces before your reaction starts, it could make the activation energy, or the amount of energy you need to actually get the reaction to occur, it brings it down, and so it makes that reaction easier. And so some people will actually use these ball mills to do reactions because sometimes the energy that you get from just shaking them will give them enough energy to react.
Cool.
Most reactions you need to bring up to a higher temperature, which is why we do high temperature solid state reactions. So this combined with the high temperature can allow you to overcome that activation barrier or give you enough energy to get the reactions.
So cool. Yeah.
That
Because
is
basically
really
what
cool.
you're doing is you're using these tools to create reactions that are difficult to happen normally.
Yes.
Under normal conditions, these chemicals wouldn't react, and you're kind of pushing them to react with one another.
Exactly.
Great.
Mhm.
Cool.
So that's what it looks like. And so you're running both hydrogen and oxygen through there, and you're basically getting a combustion reaction that's producing the fire. And then we use it to seal quartz tubes like this. Because quartz has a really high melting point, so this is an open flame that's somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 degrees Celsius. And so it gets hot enough in order to melt the quartz and seal it.
So I know you put in certain reactions and you heat them up so that a reaction occurs, right? So why do you need heat for a chemical reaction?
So, term that chemists would use is kinetics, right? And so you need to overcome an activation barrier in order to go from reactants to products in a chemical reaction. And typically that activation barrier is higher energy than either your reactants or your products. So you have to give the reactants energy to overcome that activation barrier. Heating them up is one way to give your reactants energy to overcome that activation barrier. And so for us specifically, typically the way that our reactions work is you get close to the melting point of your reactants. And so if one of your reactants is close to or at the melting point, it might start to go into the liquid phase.
Mm-hmm.
And again, increasing surface area, the amount of molecules that are coming into contact with one another,
Mm-hmm.
that helps you overcome that activation barrier.
Basically, once we've made our materials, we want to be able to do reactions with them. And so we can put them in devices like this that we've assembled, and we want to do electrochemical reactions. So essentially, we will put down our material on one side that's conductive, and we have a wire that's connected to that, and then we'll have other electrodes on this side, and we'll be able to put in our electrolytes. So these are going to essentially be like ions that will go into our material and charge it and discharge it. So this will be like what happens in your cell phone batteries or something like that, where you'll have ions moving in and out.
And that's
And
how
so-
charge is kind of in the battery or not in the
Or
battery.
not in the battery.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, and then using this device, we can actually look at how those ions are moving in and out while it's happening. So we can actually monitor the chemical reactions that are going on.
Cool.
And what we can do is look at it under an optical microscope. And so essentially what we'll be able to do is watch what's happening to the material when the ions are going in and out. So we can put it under an optical microscope, and we will hook it up to a potentiostat. So this will be able to apply a current that will shove the ions in and out of the material. And so what this will do with our optical microscopy is let us look at any color changes or just how the material is changing when our ions are going in. So
I have a question before you go on.
Yes.
So what is the significance of a color change?
So that's a good question. So what a color change will tell us is it'll tell us about how the material is charging. So when you add electrons or take electrons away from your material, that will change the light that it's absorbing and reflecting. So the graphite starts out as gray, and then when we take electrons away or add them, the color will change.
So you know whether you're getting charge added or not.
Yes.
Yep. Got it.
Ooh.
Great.
Okay. So one thing that the optical microscopy lets us do is watch how the ions are moving. And so what we're going to be looking at here is graphite, which is this grayish blue color. And then as the ions are moving in, you're going to see a wave of color travel through the material. And so that's essentially the ions moving through the material and are changing the color of the graphite as they take away or add electrons.
That's cool.
And I saw a cool symbol on there, 50 micrometers or microns.
Right.
Yeah. And
So that's
those are
our scale bar.
Cool.
So this tells us how large of a section we're looking at.
yeah.
That is useful.
And that is very tiny as well. That's
Yes.
50 millionths of a meter.
Yes. One thing you'll notice too that we can figure out with optical microscopy is that the ions will sometimes get bunched up in an area, and so that'll tell us if this material would be good for a battery or not, because you don't really want the ions to hit a wall and not be able to get around it and charge the rest of the material. So this will help you identify defects within your material too.
Cool.
using
That's
the
so
optical
cool.
microscopy. And so in our material, the blue is the full state of charge. So that means fully charged if an area is blue. And the colors before that are not fully charged yet.
Cool. When we were in your lab, we got to see all sorts of cool tools. Can you outline some of those tools and what you use them for in your research?
Yeah, so my overall research is trying to make materials that could go into a battery. And so the materials that I'm trying to make are air sensitive. So in order to run reactions that are air sensitive, I put my reactants together in the argon glove box, which you got to see. I then will either run the reaction in the arc welder, which will heat the materials up and give them enough energy to overcome that activation barrier and to react together. Or I'll seal them in a quartz tube using the hydrogen-oxygen torch, and then put that into one of the high-temperature furnaces and run that for a long time.
Cool.
The third tool that you got to see was the ball mill, which will break our materials into smaller pieces and also helps us to overcome that activation barrier. And so because you have smaller pieces and you have more surface area where the materials are able to react, you can, that brings down that activation barrier closer to the energy of the reactants, and it makes it easier to overcome.
Cool.
That's awesome. Thank you. That was a great explanation of those tools.
You use tools
Yeah.
too.
Can we talk a little bit about some of the tools that you use, Madeline? Because that's the other side. So you have developed these materials, but then of course there's the testing of those materials. So what are some of the tools that we got to see in your lab and how you use them?
Right, so what I do is try to characterize the materials that our lab is making. And so one thing that we really need to have is a device that will allow us to actually look at what's happening to those materials as it's charging and discharging. So what I made was a device that would allow us to do that. And then once we have that device that's made, we take it to our optical microscope and we can look at the material charging and discharging.
Lauren and Madeline, thank you so much for welcoming us to your lab today.
Thank you.
We learned a lot.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to visit the Warren Lab and see a little bit of what y'all are doing to help kind of solve this problem of how do we build a better battery.
Yes.
So cool.
Thanks again, and
Thank
stay
you so much.
tuned, viewers, for our Q&A right after this.
Yep, live Q&A.
Woo!
We'll be talking with Lauren and Madeline. See you
Bye.
then.